My name is LeFort. I'm OFA's economist in our policy research department. And today I will be reviewing the results of our third annual Farm Business Confidence Survey. So let me just take a moment here and I'll pull that up and we will get started. And a quick reminder, the usual reminders for these lunchtime webinars. Please keep your audio on mute if you can. And by all means, we really encourage questions. Typically how we handle these questions is if you have a question at any time, enter it in, just type it into the chat of this webinar. And at the end of the formal presentation, I'll just take the questions in the order in which they were written into the chat and get to all of your questions is our goal. So I will jump into the bulk of the survey response here. So as I mentioned, this is the third year in a row we have done our Farm Business Confidence Survey. It was open to all members. We ran it from early December until mid-January. Basically, members had the option to answer or skip any of the questions they wanted. And in total, we had 854 respondents who took the survey. So we had a decent sample of farms from across the province, across commodities, by different income ranges, et cetera, different sizes of farms. So we are pleased with the sample we have. We are always looking to increase that response rate, and we will be running this survey continually annually. So look out for the fourth edition of this survey this fall, coming probably November or December. And let's just jump into it and get the discussion going. So we surveyed we have really three things we wanted to get at in this survey is what broad things, and we had a lot of questions to kind of get the details. The first here is on what investments farmers are making in 2025. We also wanted to know what were the issues, the policy issues that our members wanted OFA working on the most. And we also wanted to flesh out what are the issues, the concerns that are keeping farmers up at night. What are the issues that farmers are most worried about for their business heading into 2026? We got some really great results on all three of those. So starting with the investment piece, we asked members in 2025 if they made additional investment by a number of categories. So buying new machinery, investing in energy efficiency, adapting on-farm technologies like precision agriculture related investments, or built any new on-farm structures. So we see the most common investment made was in buying additional machinery, whether that be new or used, and it was relatively even split between purchases of new or used machinery. And so we'll get into, and I'll kind of dive into a little bit more of some of the details of these investments. So, one thing is interesting to note is who is making investments in what. So looking at investments in agricultural technologies like precision agriculture, we see younger farmers really leading the way in terms of the relative investment in these technologies. But really what we see is larger farms with the highest income group of farmers in the survey really making the biggest investment into these technologies. So there being enough scale there to make a positive return on investment for these new farm technologies. Now, when it comes to who's expanding, we also asked, did you buy new farmland this year? Did you rent additional acres? Did you sell? Like, has your operation generally expanded or stayed the same or downsized? And again, what we see here is that the highest income group is the one expanding the most. So the green bars in this chart are the share of folks by income range that are expanding their operation or were expanding in 2025. And the gray bar is those who either said they were downsized or stayed the same. And really the biggest jump out here is that farmers in the highest income bracket are much, much more likely, more than twice or three times as likely to be expanding as other income groups that are lower. So not terribly surprising. What we see here is now, so this is our third year we've done this survey, so we can begin to look at some trends on some of these issues. And what we see really is those who have expanded or stayed the same. There are basically more and more of our members telling us that their operation more or less stayed the same. So about 73% of members told us that for 2025. That's up from about 68% in 2023. And then, as you would expect, the share of those who said they're either expanding or downsizing has also decreased over the last 2 years. So more and more of the members saying they're basically staying the same, no big expansions and no major downsizing. Where this chart here is a little bit more concerning from our end here, and I'll speak to some of the numbers we'll see on overall confidence heading into 2026. This is a 3-year trend on the relative share of farmers making investments in those three areas. So the blue chart, the blue bar there, showing us the share of farmers who are buying either new or used machinery. And that's down significantly over the last 2 years. In 2023, 48% of members were buying new or used machinery, and that's down to under 43% in 2025. Similar story for advancements in agricultural technology and for expansion of structures. All three are down compared to where they were 2 years ago. Now they're up slightly from where they were last year. And we'll get into confidence levels over the last few years in a moment. But this certainly is a concerning trend, as we're significantly below 2 years ago levels of investment. We asked members as well about their perception of the price of farmland locally from their home county. So you can probably guess that the red bar is those who said that they feel the price of farmland is too high. And the way we phrase it is relative to the income you can make from farming the land. Do you think that farmland prices locally are too high, too low, or just right? And basically what we see here is, the majority think it's too high. And it's a pretty well straight line from the highest income group are the most likely to think it's too high. So farms with income 500,000 and over, 90% of them feel it's too high. And as the income lowers, their farmers are more likely to feel, prices are just right, or even some saying it's too low. And I think what we see here is this is telling us is who's buying farmland. I think it's too high, and who's selling farmland. And I think it's just right if you're selling. Because what we see here is looking at that expansion piece again. So these dark blue and light blue bars show us who bought farmland. That's the dark blue bar, and who rented additional acres in 2025. And what we see from this is really the only income group that is making significant purchases of farmland are the highest income group. Everyone else, if they're expanding, it's much, much more likely to be renting additional acres rather than buying. So when we look back at this graph here, and we see the highest income bracket is the most likely to say that farmland is overpriced. It's not surprising when we look at the next chart and see that they are the ones buying the farmland. So if you're buying the land at today's prices, you're probably thinking that, the prices are a bit high. So now the second piece we wanted with, so we've kind of covered some of the investments. Now we're getting into confidence in the sector and in their farmer's own business. So that's what we see here. This green bar on the chart here is the relative share of farmers who are confident in their own business in each year of the survey. And that gray dotted bar is those who said they were confident in this sector. So the way we phrase these two questions is we asked, first we asked, please rate your level of confidence in the Ontario agricultural sector heading into 2026. And then the same question, but for your own business. And again, we've asked that same question for 3 years in a row. And essentially what we see here mirrors what we saw with the investment trends, which is that confidence is down fairly significantly from where it was 2 years ago. And the other thing that we see is that there is a persistent gap between farmers' confidence in their own business and confidence in the sector. So for 2026, we have some, forward-looking. How confident are you over the next year? 76% said they're at least somewhat confident to extremely confident in their own business, whereas only 57% felt the same about the industry across the province. And that's actually up slightly from last year, but down significantly from where we were in when we did it 2 years ago. So I suppose there's a number of issues that could be driving these results. But one thing that I do note about last year's, where we saw the biggest dip in confidence, is we ran our survey last year. So for looking ahead for 2025, we ran that in early December 2024, and that was about 10 days after Trump's initial threat of 25% tariffs across the board, which at that time we thought would include agriculture. And from the sounds of it, sounded like it would go in effect the day he took office. So there was a huge amount of uncertainty at the time we ran last year's survey. So very much not surprised to see the massive dip in confidence, especially in the industry confidence from 2024 looking at 2025. We've all been living with this uncertainty for 15 months or so. So again, not too surprising to see confidence edge up slightly this year, but still be below where we were 2 years ago. So I would read this as it's farmers are adapting, but it is still a highly uncertain environment that we're dealing in. And this is that confidence gap that I mentioned. So basically the difference between this green line and this dotted gray line. So the difference between confidence in your business versus the confidence you have in the entire sector. And I look at this as another kind of measure of uncertainty. This peaked last year at nearly a 20-point gap between farmers' confidence in themselves versus the sector. But what we see, though, is a persistent trend of farmers being much more confident in their own business than they are in the sector. So there is a lot of concern about the current business environment we're operating in. But this tells me that operators have a high degree of confidence in their ability to weather this uncertainty and the difficult business environment that we find ourselves in. So this, I optimistically look at this as a bit of a positive and a reflection on just how uncertain the business environment really is. But the farmers do remain confident in themselves, even if they don't have much confidence in the environment they have to operate in. I'll quickly move through some of these. Just we broke out some of the results by different categories. So this is confidence by age groups, and again, basically just a straight line here. The younger the respondent was, the more likely they were to be confident in both their business and the sector. And the older the respondent, the less confident that they were, particularly in the industry, heading into 2026. We looked at it by region, and the thing that really jumps out to me here is the last 2 years, farmers in Northern Ontario have been the most confident. This is, and really looking ahead for 2026, there's a massive gap now between where Northern farmers' confidence is versus Eastern and Western respondents. So I will be hopefully presenting these results to our Northern Federations in the coming months and have a conversation with them about what might be driving that gap in optimism for 2026. I'll be very interested for that conversation. And this is just the same. So this was the confidence in the sector, and this is confidence in own industry. And once again, what we see here, last 2 years, Northern farmers are more confident than the rest of the province. So again, I look forward to those conversations to kind of flesh out what might be driving that. Now, we also ask members, how do you believe that your business will grow? How will it change over the next year? Do you think it'll more or less stay the same? Do you think your business will expand? Do you think it'll downsize? And what we were told this year is in the highest number we've got so far on this is nearly 3/4 of respondents said my business will be about staying the same. And I think again that reflects the uncertainty of the business environment that farmers are operating in. We see it in the investments. We see it in just when we ask them about their confidence. And then when we ask them, are you going to expand or downsize? And say, probably stay the same. But one thing we have found, so again, we ask this same question every year, is that there is another gap in that our members tend to be perhaps overly conservative or a little more pessimistic about their business expansion than what actually happens. So we ask two questions every year. We ask them at the beginning of the survey, how did your business change over the last 12 months? And then at the end of the survey, we ask them, how do you believe your business will change over the next 12 months? So how they told us it actually changed is the blue bar. And the green bar is when we ask them to predict over the next 12 months, how do you think things will change? So what we see is more folks predicted that they would downsize, the green bar on the right, than actually did. So for 2025, 12% of respondents last year said, I think I'm going to downsize in 2025. And then when we asked them this year, only less than 10% actually did. Similar numbers we see for the other years of the survey. We see a kind of underestimation of those who say they'll expand. So more actually do expand than they believe will, and fewer actually downsize than they predicted. Now we get into the third leg of the stool here, which is policy priorities as well as issues of concern. So we ask a whole lot of, basically on this year, we give a whole bunch of options of policy items that members want OFA to work on. We allow members to, select as many as you like. And then we tally up the end, which of these issues got the most responses. And for the third year in a row, reducing farm taxes not only was number one, but runs away with number one. It's run away with number one each year. We've done this survey. It's not even remotely close. If I were to kind of put these into tiers, farm taxes is in its own tier, nearly 70% of respondents saying they want OFA working on this issue. And then the other other issues in the top five are all ranging from about 40 to 45% have selected it. So a massive drop off. But our top five issues that members have told us they want us working on in 2026 are reducing farm taxes, encouraging Ontarians to buy local food, supporting farmers with energy costs, supporting farmers with succession planning, and reducing interprovincial trade barriers. And right behind that was protecting the right of property access. So those are our top five issues, and I'll break out just quickly here. Again, we broke it down by region as well. So what we want to know, is there significant variance in one area of the province? There's an issue they want that may be more acute than in other areas. And I'll say, starting with Northern Ontario again, Northern Ontario continues to have the most kind of eye-raising results in some parts of the survey. This is the first time in 3 years we've been able to break the data down in any way, by region, by income, by commodity, by anything, that where farm taxes was not the number one policy priority, or at least it was tied for the number one policy priority. But encouraging Ontarians to buy local food very slightly edged out reducing farm taxes. It's almost a statistical tie. There was a bit of a rounding, but I think one more respondent selected encouraging Ontarians to buy local food for Northern Ontario than everywhere else. But across the board, every other way, reducing farm taxes was number one. And yeah, you can note some other of just slight variations of the top five here, right? Expanding natural gas access made the top five in Western and Southwest Ontario. Compensation for wildlife damage to crops, again, is the top five issue for Northern Ontario. That's been the case every year we've done this. We're well aware of the sandhill crane issue and migratory birds and the issues that has on crops. So we are quite active on that issue, and we are preparing a survey to Uh, well, OFA a few years ago did a report to quantify the financial damage that wildlife does to Ontario crops that goes uncompensated right now, and we're looking to update that this year. So keep an eye on your inbox if there's an issue that's important to you over the next couple months.
Hey Ben,
Um,
can I just interrupt you for 1 second? There is a question in the chat. It says, when you say farm taxes, I can only assume income taxes and indirect taxes as opposed to property taxes. Can you just expand a little bit on there if you can?
Sure. So, great question. And I'll get into a slide on that in a couple slides. But basically, after the first year we did this survey, we saw how many people selected farm taxes, and we needed to drill down on what farm taxes do you mean. So we then, anyone who selected farm taxes as an issue is then given a secondary question to say, which type of taxation are you most concerned about? And we list everything you can think of. Carbon tax, I mean, before, consumer carbon tax was eliminated, property tax, income tax, capital gains, sales tax, fuel tax. So we list a whole bunch of different issues. And number one, so taxes overall is number one issue. Number one tax issue, specific tax, is property tax, and it's not even remotely close. So about 75% of those who answered that follow-up question told us this property taxes is the most concerning form of taxation that they want OFA working on. And I think a distant number two was capital gains tax. So great question, and we do drill down in on that. So let me just might as well just jump to that here. So we were told that property taxes is the number one form of taxation that members want us working on. So given the volume of both those who said tax and those who selected property tax, really what we indicate from here is that property taxes are the number one issue across the board that members have told us that they want OFA working on. That being one of the policy files that I've covered since 2013, I can confidently tell everyone on the call that we have been extremely focused and busy on this issue for a number of years. So what we're looking at on this slide here is a screen grab here of just the municipalities in Ontario where the farm tax ratio, if you're familiar with the issue, the farm tax ratio is the relative rate of farm property taxes compared to residential. It's provincially mandated that it can be no more than 25% of the local residential rate. But counties and single-tier municipalities can set that rate anywhere between 0% and 25% of the local residential rate. And what we found since 2012 and in 2016, unpack assessments, farm assessments went through the roof, residential, commercial were relatively flat. And what that meant is more and more of municipalities' property taxes were then coming from farmland. And it was purely driven by the huge increase in assessments relative to residential and commercial. So I spent, I would dread to even try to calculate how much time in kilometers from 2013 to 2020 touring every county in the province from Essex to, and I think the furthest I got discussing property taxes in person was in Emo, Ontario. So we've covered everywhere, and this is the result of that advocacy of working with our county federations and going county to county, presenting each county's individual numbers and asking, based on the assessment and numbers locally, to adjust the farm tax ratio below 0.25. So all of the blue shaded municipalities on this map here are municipalities in which there is a property tax below 0.25. And the majority of these are a result of that advocacy of OFA working directly with our county federations, directly with local members, at council meetings, at staff meetings with county staff, working on this issue. So it remains a huge priority. I think the organization, and I would say for our county federations as well, should be quite proud of the results and of what we see on this map. Every blue dot on this map was very hard fought for, and in many, almost all cases, was a result of a packed council chamber with farmers and our county federations and us making the pitch and really showing up in a big way for advocacy on this issue. It's been a little quieter on this issue the last few years. You might have heard in 2020, MPAC was directed to freeze all property assessments at their 2016 values. So and we have not got a new MPAC assessment. And that really was the issue that was driving the increase in farm tax burden. So we've been in a bit of a holding period for most of the province, not in everywhere, on this issue the last few years, because there's been no new assessments. And we have no idea if or when we'll ever get a new assessment. We're now working with 10-year-old assessment data. So whatever any property owner, not just farms, any property owner in the province, your property taxes are being calculated based off of assessments from 10 years ago. So we really don't know what this issue is going to look like if and when, like I said, we get a new MPAC assessment. We know farm values have gone up in the last 10 years, but there's also increase in that period of residential and commercial assessment and industrial assessment. And what will matter is, in your county, how did farmland values change relative to residential and commercial and whatnot, right? So we don't have that data yet. We will be very keenly awaiting any news on an MPAC new assessment. It has been OFA's position for a few years for the province to tell MPAC just to get on with it and deliver a new assessment. Again, it's not MPAC's decision. They're directed by the Ministry of Finance. So this is a provincial decision that needs to be made to say, deliver a new assessment, because again, we're working with 10-year-old numbers and they become less relevant every single year. So we will wait and see on that, but we are working on a number of new tools that will be very helpful for county advocacy on this issue when this issue heats back up. We are fully ready to go when this issue gets hot again, which it will at some point. So that's just to show that on the number one issue you've told us about, we are very on this. And it goes across the board for all, as many of those issues as we've identified before. I can speak to this one most carefully. It's the number one issue that's identified, and it's an issue I deal with, so I'm happy to speak to it in more detail. But if you have questions on what OFA is doing on any of those policy positions, my email is going to be at the end of this presentation. Send me an email. I'll put you in touch if it's not something I cover with the right person at OFA to talk about it. So the other thing we asked too is not just policy issues. Obviously, that's super relevant for us, and that plays, the last thing I'll say in the policy front before I move on, that plays a significant role in our advocacy priorities for the year. So if you're not filling out this survey, please do this year coming up, because what you tell us to work on and what you're telling us are issues you're worried about is directly reflected in the work that we do over the next year. This survey has become very important for us, for our priorities and advocacy. So if you haven't filled it out last year, please fill it out this year. Please share it with any farmers and members in your area. As we gear up for this year, we want as much membership representation in this going forward as possible, because it's the most direct way you can tell us. We put numbers to it. You want us to work on taxes. You want energy costs, or cost of insurance is a rising issue. These are things that we pick up from this survey. So we really want as many members as possible filling it out this year. So all that aside, now we get into what are the other kind of beyond policy issues members are worried about. With the top 5 here, and these are consistent with what we've seen the last couple of years, especially at the top of this. Rising input costs, far and away the number. If taxation is the number one policy issue you want us working on, the number one thing you're telling us you're worried about is rising input costs. It's the same for 3 years in a row. Nearly 80% of respondents selecting that as one of the issues that they are most concerned about in 2026. Commodity prices at number 2, and costs of insurance at number 3. This has risen each of the 3 years we've done this. This has continued to just kind of rocket up the charts in terms of issues that members are telling us that they're worried about. So really, this is one of the things that has really jumped out for us over the last couple of years is the insurance piece. And this is the highest it's been, nearly 50% of respondents telling us that's one of the issues they're most concerned about. In 2025, we were quite active on this issue after hearing about that. We've had a number of different submissions on insurance-related issues. We have new fact sheets on OFA's website that try to break down one of the confusions around insurance is, on the issue of what's covered in your base policy versus what do you have to pay for as an add-on. Another thing we did last year is we got these results of insurance rising, and then we did a dedicated survey on farm insurance to the members and asked them a whole bunch of questions. We wanted to better understand what's going on with farm insurance premiums and farm insurance coverage, that this issue is rising. And one of the things we found out from that dedicated survey on insurance is that there is often a mismatch between what farmers believe is covered under their base policy and their insurance policy, and then when they go into a claim position, finding out no, that actually wasn't covered. You had to pay for that as a separate add-on or rider, and it's not covered. And then that's an extremely frustrating situation. You're paying your premium, which are high. You think you're covered for a certain thing, and then you find out, no, you were not. So after that survey, we put together a few fact sheets to help kind of clarify some of the most common misconceptions around that issue. We brought in experts from the cooperators, have a member webinar last fall dealing with some of the most common insurance issues. And so this issue, again, for 2025, and again, another kind of advertisement for why we want everyone doing this survey, is this is another going to be an issue of extreme focus this year, because this has now risen even further from where it was last year. I'll quickly move through some of the kind of, again, we break it down regionally, rising input costs across the province, north, east, or west, number one issue. But in certain areas, so again, Northern Ontario, we see cost of insurance is the number two issue overall that they're most worried about, over commodity prices and over transportation costs. So again, that is another really interesting. So we see not only is this a big issue, but it's a particularly big issue in Northern Ontario, where it's the number two issue Northern Ontario farmers are worried about in 2026. And I'll tell you, on the list, we included tariffs, we included trade access, right? And cost of insurance blew tariffs out of the water in terms of concern. So that says a lot in terms of what's happening there. So that is, again, some big signal for us for what we'll be focusing on this year. Again, we break it out by income bracket. Nothing too significant here. But there is some more variation by income, right? Like labor shortages is a bigger issue for the larger farmers, and municipal bylaws and policies are an issue to mid to smaller size farms. So that is there's some variation here when you start to break it down by income. And oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Apologies. And so again, back to what are the number one issue? Again, rising input costs, and for good reason. So this is farm total expenses after rebates for the last 6 years of data from 2018 to 2024. Over that period, farm expenses in Ontario have increased nearly 54% from 2018 to 2024. So it's not too surprising, particularly since COVID. I mean, you see the jump from 2021 to 2022, that these rising costs are increasingly concerning to members. And again, this gets reflected directly in our advocacy priorities. One of the issues we've been very active on during this time period, so since 2020, 2021, is the Advanced Payment Program, which, if you're not familiar, provides the program guidelines say it should be that it's a $100,000 interest-free loan to cover input costs for your production season, and up to $1,900,000 more at prime rate. During the early years of COVID, and really since then, working with CFA and advocating as well directly from OFA, we've been able to each year have the program guidelines amended to increase that interest-free portion to either $250,000, and 1 year it even got up to $350,000, but up from $100,000. And our goal here is to stop with the one-off changes and just make it a permanent increase to the interest-free portions of this the loans for this program. So the Canadian Federation of Agriculture annual meeting is happening right now, and OFA has another resolution. We put forward many resolutions, and it is CFA policy to push for a $350,000 interest-free portion of this program, which again is designed to help cover input costs. So it's directly related, and our work on this too is also directly related to this being the number one issue that members are telling us that they're worried about. And this is a program that is in place that at least impartially can help at least even a little bit on managing the cash flow of those rising costs. And this is made it again into our federal pre-budget submission. It is one of our top federal asks that we've been pushing for in the last several years. So again, direct result of what members are telling us from this survey. I'll more quickly move through some of these one-off pieces here because I do really want to open as much time for conversation as possible. I'm very happy to share these slides with anyone, and this presentation will be in our YouTube channel. So if you want to dive into any of these specific issues, by all means, reach out to me if you want to discuss it. But we also look at what else can we glean from the data we get of this survey, and one of the issues is on who's adopting this kind of digital agricultural technology, things like precision agriculture, et cetera, and who's not and why. So what we see really is, probably not too surprising, with farmers in Western Ontario most likely to be adopting it, farmers in Northern Ontario least likely to be adopting it. Has nothing to do with desire to adopt it. It has everything to do with the infrastructure and availability of the broadband that's required to run these advanced technologies. So we then mapped out spatially the broadband data, and really what we see is Northern Ontario has by far the biggest gaps in coverage, both in areas that have no signal and those that have some signal but weak signal. So there's a very clear correlation between where's the availability of the infrastructure and who's adopting it. Some things we found is, and again, we dig into a little bit more, is farmers who did not invest in these digital technologies were more likely to list accelerating broadband as a policy priority. So this really does support the idea that this is not an issue of, some areas of the province are more forward thinking or anything like that. This is purely a function of who has access to the broadband infrastructure to be able to invest in these. Farmers who are investing in these digital technologies too are more than twice as likely to be expanding their business compared to those who don't. So this not only is this infrastructure shortage preventing farmers from investing in these digital technologies, but also could be a real barrier to growth in the industry across the province. Because if we are more and more reliant on investment in new technology to increase margins and help the bottom line, your inability to invest in it based off of availability of infrastructure is a hugely limiting factor. Again, energy costs is another big issue that we see across the board. And again, I'll kind of quickly move through these last few slides here because, again, I want time for conversation. And again, another interesting Northern Ontario result. One of the questions we asked is, are you making any investments in direct-to-consumer marketing for your products, through a website or farmers market or a roadside stand or whatever? Are you engaged in direct-to-consumer in any way? Northern Ontario farmers were basically twice as likely to be doing that. And that really stuck out to me. So I pulled the census data, and that's kind of confirmed as well from the census data that farmers in Northern Ontario are roughly twice as likely to be engaging in direct-to-consumer marketing compared to the rest of the province. So again, really looking forward to presenting to our Northern Federations and finding out more about what's driving some of these unique results there. But that is the long and short of it. I've talked quite a bit here, but again, I'll wrap up by saying that the results of this survey really do play, like, your voice matters in this, and it's a way we can quantify what members are thinking, and we don't have to rely on what we feel like are the most important issues. This is your chance to really tell us these are the most important issues, and these are the issues we want OFA working on. The last thing I'll mention, the bottom bullet point here, I've already made a few presentations to our county federations, but it's kind of an open call that if any county federation would like a custom run of the results of this survey for how members in your county responded to it and to compare that to the provincial average, more than happy to do that. I've done it for a few counties already. I'm willing to do it to any counties that reach out. And on that note, you can always find me. I think just sending me an email is probably the easiest way, ben.lefort@ofa.on.ca. I'll leave that slide up for a moment, and I'll just type my email into the chat. So right now, I'll stop sharing and I'll see if we have any questions in the chat.
There are some questions, and I think we're going to be swinging back to taxes. No, no surprise.
My comfort zone.
So Ellie, I think you answered her question, but she didn't. I did ask her if you did, and she didn't respond back. But it says, but less property taxes, that means property is worth less. That is the only way you would have that would happen, as OFA can't change that unless there's something we don't know, basically, is what she said. So I think you can probably, I think you answered that, but I just want to make
Oh,
sure.
I'm happy to dive into it a little bit more quickly though. So two factors that impact how much property tax you pay. So your property tax bill is a function of, yes, your value, but also the tax rate applied to that value. We don't have any control over the value. We don't want to do anything that would, OFA has no like designs on impacting property values. What we're saying here on the property tax thing is what matters for the municipalities, what we can control is the rate of taxation on that value. So impact determines the values. The municipality decides the tax rate, and they also determine the tax ratio, the relative rate of farm tax relative to residential. That is the piece that we seek to change, is lowering the tax rate that's applied to your value. So I hope that clears that up.
And then so there's a some follow-up questions, so what about Huron County? What about Simcoe County? I guess they just didn't change that rate.
Yes, I have been to both of those counties 8 times each at least. And Simcoe County was very resistant to the council there. Huron County, the last time I was there was a few councilors that were in favor, but we were never able to get it over the hump there. Working with Huron Federation, we've gone there many times pushing for that. And what the difficulty in a county like Huron and Perth, Perth is another really difficult battle. And Middlesex was another really difficult battle. Areas there where we have a lot of farm valuation. Councils dig in, I found a little bit more because they're already, the relative share that they're getting from farmland is way higher than other areas. So it is a more politically difficult conversation to have there. But we have the conversations anyway, and we will continue to have them at any point. Any county federation that ever wants to engage in this issue has my number and can reach out to me at any time. Like I mentioned, it's been a little dormant since the impact values are frozen, but that's not going to last forever, and this issue will pick back up. And like I said, we are working on tools to assist to make this round of advocacy a little smoother and a little easier for county federations across the province to hopefully be able to engage on this issue directly without me being as directly involved county to county because it is a large province.
There's one more question. Any other indicators on how Ontario farmers are feeling about the impact of US tariffs going on into 2026?
Yeah, I think we can read that in across the board. There's less investment. There's lower confidence. More folks are saying, I'll probably just stay the same. Like we're seeing you take all those three things together, and really what it kind of paints a picture as is waiting out the storm to see what happens of a hopeful renewal for US CUSMA. And everyone just kind of hoping and waiting that this gets solved and straightened out. Luckily, it's the actual tariff impact has been much less than what we feared it could be this time last year. And particularly in the agri-food sector, even less so, given the CUSMA exemptions that have largely held outside of a few specific sectors so far. So I think I would take all these results as a way of saying we're waiting to see what happens with this. And July is when we'll have the next big piece of data of how turbulent this will continue to be, or whether hopefully in July there's a resolution of some kind to this issue and provide clarity and at least confidence that we know what the policy is going to look like a year from now. So I take all this stuff, all of the results we see here really paints a picture of folks are waiting, or kind of hoping and waiting to see what happens with that.
I don't see any other questions.
Excellent. So if there is not, I'll give folks a moment to think about that. But if there's not, again, I'll put my email into the chat here. If again your county wants a custom presentation, happy to do that. If you have particular questions or particular issues you want to bring forward as a priority or put on our radar, send me an email. I'll either be able to help you or I'll put you in touch with the person that's better suited to do that.
Yeah, and as Ben said, this will be on our YouTube. I also put a link in the chat that will take you right to our website where this information is stored. So the recording, and then separately, the presentation will be there as well if you just want the presentation and not have to listen to a recording. I think that's everything.
Excellent. Well, yeah, seeing no more questions. Thanks, Joanne, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate it.